They say you never truly know someone until you see what they're willing to sacrifice. I learned that lesson the hard way, through a wooden bird and a lie that nearly destroyed everything I thought I understood about family. My name is Amada Montgomery, and for 3 years I believed my father abandoned me. I was wrong about everything. The morning it all began, Boston was experiencing one of those crisp October days that makes you grateful to be alive. I was in my apartment in Back Bay, nursing my third coffee and reviewing notes for an investigative piece on corporate fraud when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the building's security was usually meticulous about announcing visitors. Standing at my door was a delivery man with a medium-sized box, unmarked except for my name written in elegant script. No return address, no shipping label, just my name. I should have been suspicious right then. In my line of work as an investigative journalist, you learn to question everything, but something about that handwriting made my heart skip. It looked familiar in a way that hurt. Inside my apartment, I placed the box on my coffee table and stared at it for a full minute before opening it. My hands trembled slightly as I cut through the tape. The first thing I saw was tissue paper, cream-colored and expensive. Underneath, carefully wrapped, was a carved wooden bird. My breath caught in my throat. The bird was exquisite, every feather detailed with the kind of patience that can't be rushed. It was a cardinal, wings spread mid-flight, captured in a moment of perfect freedom. My father used to carve birds like this. He'd spend hours in his workshop in Durango, shaping wood into life while I did homework nearby, the smell of cedar and pine filling the air between us. Beneath the bird was a photograph, edges worn soft with age. I recognized it immediately. It was from a fishing trip when I was 12, before everything fell apart. My father, my grandfather William, and me, standing by a lake in Colorado, all of us actually smiling. My father's arm was around my shoulders. William stood slightly apart, as he always did, but there was something almost peaceful in his expression. Back when we were still pretending we could be a normal family. The letter was at the bottom, sealed in an envelope with my name on it. I pulled out a single sheet of expensive stationery, and the handwriting confirmed what my heart had already started hoping and my mind had started fearing. It looked like my father's writing. The letter was brief, almost frustratingly so. Amada, I know you have every reason not to read this. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm writing to tell you that I'm sorry for the pain I've caused, and that I never stopped thinking about you. I've been working on something, a business opportunity that could change everything. I wanted you to know that I'm finally getting my life together. I hope someday we can talk. Your father, Jackson. I read it 3 times, my emotions cycling through disbelief, anger, hope, and suspicion in rapid succession. 3 years. 3 years since he'd walked out after that catastrophic argument with William. 3 years of silence, of wondering if he was even alive, of alternating between missing him desperately and hating him for leaving. And now this. My first instinct was to call William. My grandfather had raised me, really, especially after my mother died when I was 8. Jackson had tried, but he'd always been weak, always struggled with alcohol and his own demons. William was the constant, cold and demanding perhaps, but constant, and he would know what to make of this. I grabbed my phone and dialed before I could second-guess myself. William answered on the second ring. Amada, to what do I owe this pleasure at 7 in the morning? His voice was crisp, alert. At 72, my grandfather slept less than anyone I knew and worked more. I received something, a package, from Dad. The word Dad felt strange in my mouth after so long. There was a pause, heavy with meaning. I'll send a car. Bring everything. Don't touch it more than you already have. He hung up before I could respond. Typical William. No questions, no comfort, just orders. But beneath the brusque command, I'd heard something else. Concern. Maybe. Or suspicion. 40 minutes later, I was sitting in William's office in his Beacon Hill mansion, the box and its contents spread on his massive mahogany desk. He'd barely glanced at me when I arrived, his entire focus on the items before him. Now he held the letter up to the light, his reading glasses perched on his nose, his expression unreadable. Finally, he set it down and looked at me. His eyes, the same gray-blue as mine, were hard. This is not from Jackson. I felt my stomach drop. What? But the handwriting is an excellent forgery, but a forgery nonetheless. He picked up the letter again, pointing to specific words. Look here, the way the J in Jackson loops. Your father always had a distinctive hook at the top. It's completely absent here. And this curve in the lower case, see how it's too uniform? Jackson's hand always wavered slightly there, a tremor from his drinking years. This is too smooth, too practiced. I leaned closer, studying the details he indicated. Now that he pointed them out, I could see the differences. Subtle, but there. My hope began to curdle into something uglier. Someone's imitating him? Someone who had access to samples of his handwriting, yes. Someone skilled. William set the letter down and pulled open a drawer. This arrived at my office last week. He handed me another letter, also supposedly from Jackson, requesting $50,000 for a real estate investment opportunity. The handwriting was similar, but when I compared them side by side, the differences became more apparent. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, hurt creeping into my voice despite my efforts to remain professional. "Because I knew you'd react exactly as you're reacting now." Hope followed by disappointment. I was handling it. He stood and walked to the window, his back to me. "Someone is using your father's memory to manipulate us, Amada. The question is why, and more importantly, who?" I stared at the carved bird, feeling foolish. Of course it was too good to be true. Jackson Montgomery, the man who chose alcohol over his family, suddenly getting his life together and reaching out? I should have known better. But something nagged at me. The bird, though. Who else could have carved this? It's exactly like Dad's work. Your father wasn't the only woodcarver in Colorado, Amada, and if someone was close enough to him to get handwriting samples, they might have been close enough to learn his style or even steal pieces he'd made. William turned back to face me, his expression softening slightly. It was the closest thing to gentle I ever saw from him. "I know you want to believe he's trying to reach out, but we need to be smart about this." The phone on his desk rang. William answered it, listened briefly, then said, "Send him up." Who I started, but William held up a hand for silence. 5 minutes later, a man entered the office. He was in his 50s, lean and weathered, with sharp eyes that took in everything. He moved like someone who'd seen too much and trusted too little. "Thomas Keller," William introduced. "Private investigator, the best in Boston. Mr. Keller, my granddaughter Amada Montgomery." Keller nodded at me. "Miss Montgomery, your grandfather has briefed me on the situation. I've already begun preliminary inquiries." "Inquiries into what?" I asked, looking between them. William answered, "Into finding Jackson Montgomery, dead or alive, and into finding whoever is behind these letters." The bluntness of it hit me like a slap. Dead or alive, 3 years of not knowing, and William was going to find out, one way or another. "I want to help," I said suddenly. "I'm an investigative journalist. I know how to research, how to dig into people's backgrounds." "Absolutely not," William cut me off. "This is potentially dangerous, Amada. You'll stay out of it." I stood, anger flaring. "He's my father, William. I have a right." "You have a right to be safe," William said, his voice steel. "I've already lost my son. I won't lose you too." It was the closest he'd ever come to admitting he cared about me, and it stopped my argument cold. We stared at each other. Two stubborn people who loved each other but had never quite learned how to show it. Keller cleared his throat. "If I may, Miss Montgomery's skills could actually be useful. Journalists have access to databases and sources that even I don't. As long as she's not putting herself in physical danger, her assistance could expedite the investigation." William looked like he wanted to argue, but finally he nodded tersely. "Fine, but you clear everything through Keller first. No lone wolf investigating. Understood?" I nodded, relief and determination flooding through me. I was going to find my father, and I was going to find out who was cruel enough to use his memory like this. Over the next week, Keller and I worked in tandem. He headed to Durango, Colorado, to search for traces of Jackson, while I used my professional network to dig into Next Gen Investments, the company mentioned in William's fraudulent letter. What I found was disturbing. Next Gen Investments was a real company, registered in Delaware, with a Boston office, but its ownership structure was deliberately opaque. Shell companies within shell companies, all designed to hide the real power behind the operation. The listed CEO was a Gerald Winters, but when I tried to research him, I hit walls. No social media presence, no interviews, no photographs, a ghost running a multi-million-dollar investment firm. I expanded my search, looking for any complaints or lawsuits. That's when I found the pattern. 6 elderly investors had filed complaints with the state attorney general's office over the past 5 years, claiming they'd been defrauded by NextGen. Each case had been settled quietly, sealed by NDAs and confidentiality agreements. Each complainant had since died, mostly from natural causes given their age, but the timing was convenient. I was compiling my notes when Keller called. "I found where he was living," Keller said without preamble. "A small rental house on the outskirts of Durango. Neighbors say he moved out 3 weeks ago." My heart sank. "Moved where?" "That's the interesting part. He left with a man, older gentleman, well-dressed, drove a nice car. Neighbors thought it might be a business partner. Called him Phil or Phillips. They left in a hurry, middle of the night." Phillips. The name meant nothing to me, but I wrote it down. Did anyone seem concerned? Like maybe he didn't leave willingly? No one mentioned anything like that. But I did some digging into his finances. Your father was running a small woodworking business, selling pieces to tourists and local galleries. Modest income but steady. Then, about 6 weeks ago, his bank account started showing unusual activity. What kind of unusual? Large deposits, 50,000 at a time, followed by immediate withdrawals of the same amount. It happened 4 times over 2 weeks. Classic money laundering pattern. I felt sick. "You think Dad was involved in something illegal?" "I think someone was using his accounts. Whether he knew about it or not is another question. Keller's voice softened slightly. I'm sending you what I found. There's more. Phone records show he made several calls to a Boston number in the weeks before he left, working on tracking down whose number it is. After we hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen. My father, possibly involved in money laundering, possibly coerced into it. And now he was gone, disappeared with some mysterious Phillips character. I pulled up every database I had access to, searching for Phillips connected to next-gen investments, to Boston, to financial fraud. Hours passed. My coffee went cold. And then, finally, a hit. Sean Phillips, age 45, recently released from federal prison after serving 7 years for investment fraud and elder abuse. His MO was classic long con, befriending vulnerable people who had connections to wealth, gaining their trust, using them to access bigger targets. I stared at his mugshot. Distinguished looking, the kind of face that inspired confidence. Exactly the type who could have manipulated my father. My phone rang, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Silence. Then breathing, ragged and wet-sounding. In the background, a rhythmic clicking sound, like metal on metal. Who is this? I demanded. The line went dead. My hands were shaking as I set down the phone. Wrong number, probably. But the timing felt wrong. Too coincidental. I called the number back. It rang once, then went to a generic voicemail. I was still staring at my phone when it rang again. This time William's number. Come to the house immediately, he said. We've received another package. I drove to Beacon Hill faster than I should have, my mind racing. Another package meant another demand, another manipulation. When I arrived, William was in his study with Keller. On the desk was a small cardboard box. It came by courier an hour ago, William said. Different delivery service than yours, but same lack of tracking information. Inside was a USB drive and another letter. This one was more direct. William Montgomery, your son's life is worth $2 million to me. Wire the money to the account information on the drive, and you'll see him again. Refuse, and Jackson Montgomery dies. You have 48 hours. Don't involve the police. I'll know. My grandfather's face was ashen. There's a video on the drive. Keller had already pulled it up on William's computer. I moved closer, my heart hammering. The video was short, maybe 30 seconds. It showed a man in a concrete room, hands bound, face gaunt and bruised, but it was unmistakably my father. Please, Jackson said, his voice cracking. William, if you're watching this, I need help. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. Please, just do what they ask. Amada baby, I'm sorry. The video cut off abruptly. I realized I was crying. William's hand gripped the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles were white. We pay them, William said finally. Whatever they want, we pay them. No, I said, surprising myself. Both men looked at me. If we pay, they'll kill him anyway. You know that. They can't risk leaving him alive to identify them. So what do you suggest? William's voice was harsh. We just let him die? We find him. We find him before the 48 hours are up. I turned to Keller. You said he left with Phillips 3 weeks ago. That's not a lot of time to move far, especially if they wanted to keep him contained somewhere secure. He's probably still in the region. Keller nodded slowly. The area around Glenwood Springs has a lot of abandoned properties. Old mining operations, defunct resorts. If I were going to hide someone, that would be the place. Then that's where we start. I wiped my eyes, forcing myself to think clearly. But we need more than a hunch. We need solid intelligence. I picked up the carved bird from my earlier package, the one I'd brought with me. In my anger and disappointment, I'd almost forgotten about it. Now I examined it more carefully, turning it over in my hands. That's when I saw them. Tiny letters carved into the underside of one wing, so small I'd missed them before. I grabbed a magnifying glass from William's desk. SP34, Newton's 118 watts, I read aloud. Keller was already on his laptop. SP could be Sean Phillips. The numbers could be coordinates. It took him less than 5 minutes to confirm. There's a property registered to a shell company that traces back to next-gen investments. It's near Glenwood Springs, old mining area. The coordinates match. I felt a surge of something like hope. Dad left us a clue. He carved it into the bird, knowing we'd find it eventually. Or someone planted it to lead us into a trap, William said, ever the pessimist. But even he looked slightly hopeful. Either way, it's our best lead, Keller said. I'll head out there tonight, do reconnaissance. If Jackson is being held there, we'll need to move carefully. These people have already proven they're willing to kill. I'm coming with you, I said. Absolutely not, both Keller and William said in unison. Yes, I am. I'm the journalist, remember? I know how to observe without being seen, how to document evidence, and if we're going to the police with this, we need ironclad proof. You need me. The argument went on for another 20 minutes, but I didn't budge. Finally, Keller gave in, with strict conditions. I would stay in the car, I would not approach the property, and I would follow his instructions without question. William looked like he wanted to lock me in my room, but even he recognized that stubborn look. I'd inherited it from him, after all. Before I left, I made one more decision. I called an FBI contact, Special Agent Diana Foster. I'd interviewed her several times for articles on white-collar crime, and I trusted her. Amada, Diana answered warmly, it's been a while. What can I do for you? I explained the situation, careful to leave nothing out. When I finished, there was a long silence. Next Gen Investments, Diana said finally. We've been building a case against them for months. The owner, Arthur Blackwood, is one of the most sophisticated financial criminals we've ever investigated. If your father stumbled into his operation somehow. Blackwood? The name sent a chill through me. You know him? I know of him. He and my grandfather were business rivals 20 years ago. It ended badly. Badly? How? I tried to remember the story William had told me once, years ago. Blackwood's brother died. There was some kind of business deal gone wrong. William was involved, though he was never charged with anything. Blackwood blamed him, swore revenge. But that was decades ago. Diana was quiet for a moment. Amada, this might not be random. If Blackwood has held a grudge against your grandfather for 20 years, using your father as a weapon would be exactly his style. He's patient, meticulous, and absolutely ruthless. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about money. It was personal. Blackwood wanted to destroy William, and he was using Jackson to do it. We're planning to check out a location in Colorado tonight, I said, coordinates we found hidden in a message from Dad, if he's there. Don't go, Diana interrupted. Let us handle it. If Blackwood is involved, you're walking into a situation way beyond your experience. My father is there. I'm going. Diana sighed. Fine, but send me the coordinates. I'll get local FBI on standby. And Amada, be careful. Blackwood doesn't leave loose ends. That evening, Keller and I drove toward Glenwood Springs. The landscape grew increasingly desolate as we left the main highway, winding roads cutting through rocky terrain dotted with scrub brush and abandoned structures. The property the coordinates led to was an old mining complex, long since shut down. A rusted chain-link fence surrounded it, warning signs faded to near illegibility. In the fading light, it looked like something from a horror movie. Keller parked a quarter-mile away, hidden by an outcropping of rock. He pulled out surveillance equipment, thermal imaging gear that looked military-grade. Stay here, he ordered. I'm going to get closer, see what we're dealing with. I nodded, watching as he disappeared into the twilight. The minutes crawled by. I tried to stay calm, but my imagination kept conjuring images of my father in that concrete room, beaten and terrified. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. FBI has been notified. Turn around now. My heart stopped. How did they know? Unless someone was watching us right now. I scanned the area frantically but saw nothing. Another text came through. Your father dies if you don't leave. 30 seconds. I called Keller immediately. Someone knows we're here. They're threatening to kill Dad if we don't leave. Get out of the car and run, Keller said, his voice tight. There's a rifle sight trained on the vehicle. Go, now. I didn't question it. I threw open the door and ran, heading for the rocks Keller had disappeared behind. Behind me, I heard the car alarm start blaring. A gunshot cracked through the air, and the windshield exploded. Hands grabbed me, pulling me behind cover. Keller, are you hit? No, I'm okay. I was shaking violently. They were watching. They knew we were coming. Which means someone tipped them off, someone who knew our plans. Keller's face was grim. We need to pull back, regroup. This is bigger than we thought. We made our way back to where Keller had a backup vehicle stashed, a precaution I was now grateful for. As we drove away, my phone rang again. Different number, but I knew somehow it was them. I answered on speaker. What do you want? A voice, digitally distorted, came through. FBI involvement changes things, Miss Montgomery. The price is now $5 million. You will deliver it personally. Alone. Or your father dies. We'll be in touch with location and time. Wait, I said desperately. How do I know he's even alive? There was a pause. Then, faintly, I heard my father's voice. Amada, don't, Blackwood, he's... A sharp sound, like a slap, and the voice cut off. Then the distorted voice again. You have your proof. Await our instructions. The line went dead. Keller and I looked at each other. He said Blackwood's name, I said. He identified him. Which means they'll probably kill him now, whether we pay or not. Keller's jaw was tight. We need the FBI, full force, and we need them now. The next morning, Williams' mansion became a command center. Diana Foster arrived with a team of agents, turning the dining room into an operations hub. Maps of Colorado and Massachusetts covered the table, alongside financial records, surveillance photos, and everything we knew about Arthur Blackwood. Blackwood himself was a ghost. Billionaire, real estate developer, philanthropist, respected member of Boston society. But underneath, according to FBI files, he was running an empire built on fraud, extortion, and violence. NextGen Investments was just one of a dozen shell companies he used to launder money and defraud investors. We've been trying to build a case against him for 3 years, Diana explained, but he's careful. Everything goes through intermediaries. We've never been able to connect him directly to any crimes. Until now, I said. If Dad was investigating him, if he has proof. Then he's the witness we've been looking for, Diana finished, which is exactly why Blackwood wants him dead. Keller had been quiet, studying the maps. Now he spoke up. I found something. The property at those coordinates. It's not registered to NextGen directly. It goes through 2 other shells first. But the final owner is a company called Blackwood Holdings, registered in the Caymans. Blackwood owns the property where we think Jackson is being held, Diana said. That's a connection. It's not enough for a warrant, one of the other agents said, not without more concrete evidence. I thought about the laptop, wondering if Jackson had left behind any evidence in Durango. Keller, the house where Dad was living in Colorado, did you search it thoroughly? The landlord had already cleared it out, rented it to someone else. But there's a storage unit, paid up for 6 months. I have the number. Within hours, local Colorado police had opened the unit. Inside, among boxes of woodworking tools and personal effects, they found Jackson's laptop. Keller had it couriered overnight to Boston. When it arrived, the FBI's tech specialist, a young woman named Riley, took it apart piece by piece, circumventing passwords and recovering deleted files. What we found changed everything. For 6 months before his disappearance, my father had been documenting everything. Photos of meetings between Blackwood and known criminals, audio recordings of conversations discussing money laundering operations, financial records showing how NextGen Investments funneled illegal money through legitimate real estate deals, emails between Blackwood and Sean Phillips discussing how to handle investors who ask too many questions, and messages between Jackson and Diana Foster. I stared at the email thread, feeling the world tilt. My father had been working with the FBI. He'd been an informant, gathering evidence against Blackwood. That's why he'd disappeared. He'd been trying to protect us while building a case. The last email from Diana to Jackson was dated 3 days before he vanished. Jackson, we have reason to believe your cover has been compromised. Cease all contact immediately. Extraction point B, tomorrow 0900. Do not deviate from the plan. He'd never made it to the extraction point. I looked at William. My grandfather was sitting very still, his face carved from stone. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. He was protecting us. All this time he was protecting us. 3 years of estrangement, 3 years of believing Jackson had abandoned us again, and the truth was he'd been fighting for us in the only way he knew how. The guilt was crushing. Diana put a hand on my shoulder. He made the choice to help us. He knew the risks. And you let him? William's voice was suddenly sharp, angry. You let my son put himself in danger? He came to us, Mr. Montgomery. He'd stumbled onto something while trying to sort out a business deal, realized who he was dealing with, and he wanted to do the right thing. We tried to protect him. We failed. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Keller spoke up. The question now is, how do we get him back? Diana looked at the evidence spread before us. We have enough here to get warrants for every property Blackwood owns. We can hit them simultaneously. Multiple locations across 3 states. One of them will have Jackson. And if they kill him the moment you breach? I asked. That's a risk, but we don't have a lot of options. The 48-hour deadline they gave expires in 6 hours. If we're going to move, it has to be now. I thought about it. About my father in that concrete room, waiting for rescue or death. Then I thought about the phone call, the demand that I deliver the money personally. They want me to bring the ransom, I said slowly. What if we use that, set up a meeting, but have FBI ready to move the moment they have Dad in sight? Diana shook her head. Too dangerous. You'd be walking into a trap. Everything is a trap at this point, I countered. But this way, we control the timing. We set the meeting place, somewhere public where they can't easily take me. You have agents in position. The moment they produce Dad, you move in. They'll see it coming, one of the agents objected. The moment they spot surveillance, they'll run. Then don't let them spot it, I said. I'm a journalist. I know how to wear a wire, how to keep people talking. Give me a camera, give me audio, and I'll get you what you need. William stood abruptly. No, absolutely not. I won't risk you, Amada. You don't have a choice, I said gently. Because I'm doing this whether you approve or not. Dad risked everything for us. I'm not going to sit here safely while he dies. The argument raged for another hour. but I didn't budge. Finally, Diana agreed, with conditions. Multiple surveillance teams, body armor under my clothes, a panic word that would bring agents in immediately, and we would pick the location, somewhere that gave us maximum advantage. The call came 2 hours later. The digitally disguised voice gave me instructions. Boston Common. The Frog Pond. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Come alone. Bring 5 million in bearer bonds. We'll be watching. Any sign of police, and your father dies. I need proof he's alive, I insisted. Recent proof. I'm not bringing anything until I know he's okay. There was a pause. Then, check your email in 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, a video arrived. Jackson, looking worse than before, holding today's newspaper. Amada, he said weakly. Please, just do what they say. Don't be a hero. I love you. Tears blurred my vision, but I pushed them back. Tomorrow I would see him again, one way or another. The FBI worked through the night, setting up surveillance around Boston Common. Plainclothes agents would pose as tourists, joggers, vendors. Snipers would be positioned on surrounding buildings. I would wear a wire so sophisticated it couldn't be detected even with a wand. In my purse, a GPS tracker. In the false bottom of the briefcase with the bearer bonds, another tracker and a camera. Diana went over the plan with me a dozen times. Your job is simple. Make the exchange, get visual confirmation that Jackson is there and alive, then get away from the area. We'll handle the arrest. What if they grab me? I asked. They won't. Too public, too risky. They want the money and they want to disappear. Grabbing you would complicate that. But I could see the doubt in her eyes. In truth, none of us knew what would happen. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in William's study, the 3 wooden birds in front of me. The original cardinal from the package, and 2 more I'd found in Jackson's storage unit, clearly carved but never finished. 3 birds, representing 3 people who'd lost each other and couldn't find the way back. William found me there around 2 a.m. He sat down across from me, looking every one of his 72 years. I was too hard on him, he said quietly. Your father. I expected him to be someone he wasn't, and I punished him for failing to meet expectations he could never reach. He wasn't perfect, I said, but he tried. He tried, and when it mattered most, he was braver than I ever gave him credit for. William picked up one of the unfinished birds. If something happens tomorrow. Nothing's going to happen, I interrupted. We're bringing him home. William nodded, but his eyes were distant. I've spent my whole life building an empire, Amada. Making money, accumulating power. And for what? My son disappeared thinking I hated him. I can't get those 3 years back. Then make the next 3 years different, I said. Make them count. The next afternoon, I walked into Boston Common carrying a briefcase with $5 million in bearer bonds. The autumn sun was bright, families were out enjoying the weather, and I was about to either save my father or watch him die. The frog pond was crowded with children and tourists. I found a bench near the edge, sat down and waited, the wire pressed against my skin under my blouse. In my ear, an earpiece disguised as a hearing aid fed me updates from Diana. All teams in position. We have eyes on you. Stay calm. A man sat down next to me, older, distinguished, wearing an expensive suit. He didn't look at me, just stared straight ahead. Miss Montgomery, he said quietly. Lovely day for a walk in the park. I recognized the voice even without the digital distortion. Where's my father? Nearby, but first, the bonds. Open the case, slowly. Let me see them. I did as instructed, opening the briefcase just enough for him to see the stacks of certificates inside. He smiled slightly. Good. Now, your father is in a vehicle 2 blocks from here. Once I confirm these are genuine, I'll make a call and he'll be released. That wasn't the deal, I said. I see him first, then you get the money. The man's smile disappeared. You're in no position to negotiate, Miss Montgomery. Neither are you. You're sitting in the middle of a public place in broad daylight, about to take possession of stolen money. I'm guessing you'd like to leave here without attracting attention. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to call whoever has my father and have them bring him here. When I see him, when I know he's alive, you get the money. For a long moment, we stared at each other. Then he pulled out a phone and made a call. Bring the package to the common, north side of Frog Pond. Yes, now. We waited in tense silence. Minutes ticked by. Then I saw them, 2 men, supporting a third between them. Even from a distance, I recognized Jackson's build, his walk, though he was clearly weak. They brought him closer, and my heart broke. He was gaunt, bruised, barely able to stand on his own. But his eyes found mine, and in them I saw recognition, relief, and something else. Warning. Dad, I breathed, starting to stand. The man beside me grabbed my wrist. The money first. I shoved the briefcase toward him, my eyes never leaving Jackson. Let him go. The man nodded to his associates. They released Jackson, who stumbled forward a few steps. I rushed to catch him, supporting his weight as he sagged against me. "Amada," he whispered. "Run. It's a trap. Blackwood is here, he's—" The sharp crack of a gunshot cut through the afternoon air. People screamed. I threw myself over Jackson, pulling him down. Around us, chaos erupted. The FBI agents broke cover, weapons drawn, shouting for everyone to get down. The man who'd been sitting beside me was on the ground, clutching his shoulder where a bullet had struck him. The two men who'd brought Jackson were running, but FBI agents tackled them before they made it 10 feet. More gunshots rang out from a building across the street. I could hear Diana's voice in my earpiece, sharp commands being issued. Return fire from the FBI sniper positions, glass shattering. And through it all, my father's voice in my ear. "Blackwood, building, east side." I looked where he indicated and saw a figure in a top-floor window, watching the chaos below. Even from this distance, I could see his face, cold and calculating. Arthur Blackwood. Then he was gone, disappearing back into the building. FBI agents swarmed around us. Paramedics appeared, checking Jackson over, loading him onto a stretcher. I tried to go with him, but Diana held me back. "Let them work. He's safe now. You did it, Amada." But it didn't feel like victory. Blackwood had escaped. The man on the ground was Sean Phillips, and the other two were mid-level operatives. But the man ultimately responsible, the one who'd orchestrated everything, had slipped away again. The FBI raided the building immediately, but Blackwood was gone. A service elevator, a tunnel to an adjacent building, a car waiting in an underground garage. He'd planned his escape route before he ever came to watch his plan unfold. At the hospital, doctors confirmed what I could already see. Jackson had been systematically beaten over weeks, malnourished, dehydrated, 3 broken ribs, a fractured wrist, and countless bruises and lacerations. But he was alive, and he was going to recover. William arrived within the hour. I watched from the doorway as my grandfather approached Jackson's hospital bed. Neither spoke at first. Then William did something I'd never seen in my entire life. He took Jackson's hand and held it, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I'm sorry," William said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, son, for everything. For not seeing what you were trying to do. For the years of disappointment and harsh words. For failing you as a father." Jackson squeezed his hand weakly. "You didn't fail me, Dad. I failed myself, over and over. But when it mattered, when I had a chance to do something right, to protect our family, I took it, and I'd do it again." They talked for hours after that, William sitting beside the bed, Jackson drifting in and out of consciousness but always coming back to the conversation. 3 years of hurt and misunderstanding, beginning to heal. Over the next few days, as Jackson recovered, the full story came out. He'd moved to Durango after the fight with William, trying to start over. He'd been sober for 2 years, running his woodworking business, doing well. Then Sean Phillips had shown up, friendly and charming, claiming to be an investor interested in Jackson's work. They'd become friends, or so Jackson thought. Phillips had introduced him to investment opportunities, ways to make his business grow faster. Jackson, still naive despite everything, had trusted him. Then he'd met Arthur Blackwood at a gallery opening where his work was displayed. Blackwood had been charming too, complimentary about the carvings. They'd talked about business, about Boston, about William Montgomery, and something in Blackwood's eyes when William's name came up had set off alarm bells. Jackson started researching, using skills he'd learned from watching me work as a journalist. He discovered next-gen investments, the pattern of fraud, the shell companies. And he'd realized that Phillips was drawing him into something criminal, something designed to hurt his father, so he'd gone to the FBI. He'd become an informant, gathering evidence while pretending to go along with Phillips's schemes. The money laundering through his accounts, he'd allowed it to happen while documenting everything. The meetings with Blackwood, he'd recorded them secretly. For months, he'd lived a double life, getting closer to Blackwood's operation, while feeding information to Diana Foster and her team. And then Phillips had found the wire Jackson was wearing to a meeting. They'd grabbed him, and he'd been their prisoner ever since. The plan had always been to use him to get to William, to destroy my grandfather financially and emotionally. The fake letters were just the beginning. They'd planned to drag it out, make William pay millions, then send his son back to him piece by piece. "But I left you clues," Jackson told me, his hand gripping mine from the hospital bed. "The wooden bird, I carved it months ago, before they took me. I gave it to a gallery owner I trusted, with instructions to send it to you if anything happened to me. The coordinates, I carved those in during one of the brief moments they left me alone. I knew you'd figure it out, baby girl. You're smarter than all of us." The FBI built their case methodically. Phillips cooperated almost immediately, giving up everything he knew about Blackwood's operation in exchange for a reduced sentence. The other operatives followed suit. Financial records from Jackson's laptop, combined with the new testimony, gave them enough for dozens of federal charges. But Blackwood himself remained at large for 3 weeks. He'd fled the country, the FBI believed, probably to a nation without an extradition treaty. Then, Keller called me with interesting news. Blackwood's been spotted. He's in Monaco, living in a villa under an assumed name. But he made a mistake. He contacted his daughter, and we traced the call. Can we extradite him? I asked. Not easily, but there's another option. His daughter is cooperating with authorities. She's willing to testify about his crimes, including things we didn't know about. Money hidden in offshore accounts, other victims, other frauds. She's terrified of him, has been for years, and she wants to be free of him. The FBI worked with international authorities. Monaco police raided Blackwood's villa and detained him while extradition proceedings began. It took 6 months of legal wrangling, but eventually, Arthur Blackwood was brought back to Boston in handcuffs. The trial was a media sensation. I attended every day, sitting in the gallery, taking notes. This was my story to tell, and I was going to tell it right. Jackson testified, looking healthier but still carrying the scars of his captivity. He detailed everything: the manipulation, the investigation, the evidence he'd gathered. William testified too, about the decades-old grudge Blackwood had nursed, about his brother's death in a business deal that had gone wrong, about threats Blackwood had made over the years that had seemed like empty words until now. And I testified. About the letters, the wooden bird, the ransom demand. About watching my father being used as a weapon against my family. About 3 years of believing he'd abandoned us, only to discover he'd been fighting for us all along. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the verdict was unanimous on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, extortion, fraud, money laundering. The judge sentenced Blackwood to 40 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole. As they led him away, Blackwood looked at me. His face was emotionless, but his eyes burned with hatred. "The Montgomery family always ruins everything," he said. "My brother, my business, my life. You've won nothing. You've only perpetuated the cycle." "No," I said clearly. "We've broken it. You held on to hatred for 20 years, and it destroyed you. We're not going to make that mistake." My article series about the case won the Pulitzer Prize for investigative journalism, but that wasn't what mattered to me. What mattered was the family dinners that became a regular occurrence, Jackson and William learning to talk to each other like they should have decades ago. Jackson refused William's offer of a position at Montgomery Industries. Instead, he founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping victims of financial fraud and protecting whistleblowers. He used his experience, his pain, to prevent others from suffering the same way. "I spent so much of my life running from responsibility," he told me over coffee one morning. Alcohol, bad decisions, anything to avoid facing who I really was. But in that concrete room, stripped of everything, I realized something. I wasn't weak. I just convinced myself I was because it was easier than trying. William came to the nonprofit's opening ceremony. He donated a substantial sum and sat in the front row as Jackson gave his speech. Afterward, I watched them embrace, really embrace, for the first time in my memory. "I'm proud of you, son," William said. "Not because of what you've built here, though that's impressive. I'm proud because you found your courage when it mattered most." As for me, I continued my work as a journalist, but with a new understanding. I'd always been driven, independent, so focused on truth and justice that I sometimes forgot about compassion and understanding. Watching my father and grandfather rebuild their relationship taught me that truth without mercy is just another form of cruelty. I spent more time with family. I learned woodcarving from Jackson, my hands shaping the same kind of birds he'd made for years. It was meditative, peaceful, and it gave us time to talk about things we'd never discussed before. About my mother, about his struggles with addiction, about forgiveness and second chances. On the first anniversary of Jackson's rescue, the 3 of us gathered in William's study. Jackson had finished the 2 incomplete birds from his storage unit, and now 3 cardinals sat on William's desk, wings spread in flight. "They represent us," Jackson explained. "Separate for so long, but still connected. Still family." William picked up one of the birds, running his fingers over the intricate carving. "I've been thinking about my legacy. Montgomery Industries will continue, but that's not what I want to be remembered for. I want to be remembered as a man who learned, late in life, that love matters more than power." "You have time to build that legacy," I said. "We all do." Jackson smiled. "We've been given a second chance. Not many families get that. Let's not waste it." We didn't. Over the next years, our family bond grew stronger. We had Sunday dinners, holiday celebrations, ordinary moments that felt extraordinary because we'd almost lost the chance to have them. We talked about the hard things, worked through old resentments, and learned to appreciate each other for who we actually were rather than who we wished we'd been. I wrote one final article about the case, published on the 2nd anniversary of Blackwood's sentencing. It wasn't about the crime or the trial. It was about redemption, about a man who'd spent years believing he was worthless and discovering that he had the strength to save his family. About a father and son who'd been estranged for decades, finding their way back to each other. about a granddaughter who'd learned that judgment without understanding is empty. The article ended with a quote from Jackson. People talk about breaking the cycle of family dysfunction like it's simple, like you just decide to do better and it happens. But it's not simple. It's daily work. It's choosing to be vulnerable when every instinct tells you to protect yourself. It's forgiving when the hurt is still fresh. It's believing that people can change, including yourself. My father, my daughter, and I, we're not perfect. We never will be. But we're trying every day to be better than we were, and that's enough. The wooden birds still sit in William's study, a reminder of where we've been and where we're going. Sometimes I look at them and remember that terrible autumn when I received that first letter, when I believed my father was either dead or didn't care enough to contact me properly. I remember the fear, the anger, the desperate hope. But mostly, I remember the moment in that hospital when Jackson squeezed my hand and told me he'd always believed in me, that even in his darkest moments, the thought of his daughter kept him fighting. I remember William's tears as he apologized to his son. I remember learning that love, real love, isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Blackwood spent his rage on revenge and destroyed himself. We chose a different path. We chose healing. And in the end, that choice made all the difference. 3 birds in flight, separate but together, damaged but free. That's us. That's family. The morning I finished writing that final article, I received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a photograph I'd never seen before, my father and William from 30 years ago, standing together at a construction site, both smiling. On the back, in Jackson's handwriting, "We can't change the past, but we can refuse to let it define our future. Thank you for saving us all. Love, Dad." I put the photograph on my desk next to my Pulitzer, but if I'm honest, the photograph means more. The award recognizes my work, my skill as a journalist, but that photograph represents something deeper. It represents a family that fell apart and found the courage to come back together. It represents forgiveness earned and freely given. It represents the truth that people are more complicated than villains and heroes, that we're all capable of terrible mistakes and extraordinary grace. Sometimes, late at night, I think about how close we came to losing everything, if Jackson hadn't left those clues, if I hadn't pushed to investigate, if William hadn't been willing to listen, to change, to admit he was wrong. Any one of those things goes differently, and we never find our way back to each other. But we did. We found each other in the darkness, and we held on. That's the story I tell now, not just in articles, but in the way I live. When I'm tempted to write someone off, to judge without understanding, I remember my father in that concrete room, fighting for his family in the only way he could. I remember my grandfather's tears, the walls he'd built around his heart crumbling when faced with the possibility of losing his son forever. I remember my own certainty that Jackson had abandoned us, and how wrong I was. Life is messier than the stories we tell about it. People are more complex than we want them to be. Redemption is possible, but it's not clean or simple or easy. It requires something from everyone involved, a willingness to see past the hurt to the human underneath. Arthur Blackwood chose hate. He nursed his grudge for 20 years, let it consume him until there was nothing left but the desire for revenge. And in the end, what did it get him? A prison cell and a legacy of pain. We chose differently. We chose to do the hard work of forgiveness, of rebuilding trust, one conversation at a time. We chose to believe that people could change, that families could heal, that love was stronger than bitterness. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, arguments, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves, but we kept choosing each other, kept showing up, kept trying. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, we became the family we were always meant to be. 3 wooden birds on a desk in Boston, 3 people who lost their way and found it again. 3 lives changed by the choice to love instead of hate, to forgive instead of condemn, to hope instead of despair. That's my story. That's our story. And I'm grateful, every single day, that it ends not with bitterness and separation, but with reconciliation and love. The cycle is broken. The hatred that destroyed Blackwood ends with him. What we're building, what we're leaving behind, is something better, something worth carving into wood and preserving forever. 3 birds in flight, separate but together, free at last.